So the science of addiction and alcohol, you can look at through so many different lenses, but I really love the way that Gabor Mate talks about it. And he talks about how addiction isn't necessarily about the substance, kind of as I've always said, and it's more so about the pain that we are trying to soothe. In particular, he references a lot are endorphins. So alcohol and many addictive substances, they actually activate the brain's endorphin and dopamine systems. And your endorphins are the brain's natural opioids. So they reduce pain, they create these feelings of warmth, of safety, of comfort. But for someone who, like me, grew up without enough nurturing touch, who maybe experienced separation, who didn't have enough connection or emotional attunement with caregivers, then alcohol can mimic, or any addiction can mimic that sense of safety and bonding because it releases the endorphins that calm the stress system. In particular, I love how Mate talks about in his book, In the Realm of Hungry Ghosts, that addiction is often the brain's attempt to self-medicate a deficit of these natural feel-good hormones that would normally come from healthy relationships and secure attachment. And so the deeper root here, we can then say, is that he connects this to early developmental trauma. And I see this so much in the work that I do as a somatic practitioner. I see it so much in the work that I've done in working with violent offenders and working in crisis and trauma centers. If a child grows up under stress, abuse, neglect, or without consistent emotional presence, then their brain literally develops with fewer endorphin receptors, and that impairs their regulation systems. And so that means that as adults, they are biologically predisposed to seek these external substances or the behaviors to fill that void that I was talking about. And so alcohol then isn't the root of the problem. It is the compensation. It is the solution for the body and mind's unmet needs for safety, connection, and relief. So for me personally, I found that when I learned that knowledge, that I was able to offer myself so much more self-compassion, which is that antidote to shame, right? That the alcohol wasn't something I needed to be ashamed of. It wasn't a behavior that I needed to judge myself for. Instead, it was my body brilliantly working to keep me safe, to keep me soothed, to keep me feeling secure in all of the ways that I never felt back then. Now, in kind of keeping with this pace, I would really just love to give even more information so that you can make your own informed choice when it comes to drinking. And I just want to state here, I'm not trying to sway you in one way or the other, but I do think it's important that we are informed and that we can hold the upgraded science in our mind so that we can have more informed decisions when it comes to participating in drinking or not. A great resource that I would recommend leaning into would be Andrew Huberman. He has the Huberman Lab podcast, but he is a neuroscientist who has done a ton of research or gathered a lot of other research and studies and presented them in a really wonderful and easy to understand way when it comes to alcohol. Because he is a neuroscientist, he talks a lot about what alcohol does to the brain. So first and foremost, alcohol is a known neurotoxin. There is no other way to put it, you guys. It's poison. And it shrinks the gray matter in your brain, even at what would be considered moderate levels. So gray matter is those key processing areas, the parts of your brain that help you to remember, to regulate your emotions, to make thoughtful decisions. And so when you drink, these areas become reduced in volume or in function. Now, alcohol can also suppress your prefrontal cortex, which we're also kind of talking about here, but your reasoning and your impulse control, which can explain why we make risky choices when we're drinking. Now, he's also provided evidence that alcohol disrupts your dopamine, serotonin, and cortisol regulation. And kind of the side effect of that cortisol regulation is that then when you stop drinking, your stress systems can become overactive. Now, moving on to kind of our digestive function. So he talks a lot too about the gut, brain, liver axis. So essentially, alcohol can inflame and disrupt the microbiome, which will impact your mood and your immunity. And he claims, based on his science, that there is no truly safe level to drink alcohol. And his guideline was 2 drinks maximum per week. And listen, he's gotten a lot of flack for saying this. There's even a clip right now on his Instagram where he's being interviewed on a panel with Bill Maher, and they're kind of cracking jokes with him and being like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to drink. And he said, no, really, you need to not drink at all because it's not good for you. Now, if you are a drinker or you have been drinking or you drink occasionally and you're listening to this and you're like, okay, well, now what do I do? I've done irreversible damage. I want to tell you that many of these effects are reversible with abstinence up to 2 to 6 months based on the research. So hope here is definitely real. And then I think one thing that is really working in people's favor, and I've seen this a lot with like my younger brother. My younger brother is 6 years younger than me, and I feel like his age group, even though he's not far off, he did not drink as much as I did, like in college or, late in high school. And there's definitely a cultural trend where there is a decline in alcohol consumption today. Let me just give you some numbers and figures to kind of back this up. So US drinking is at a record low. Only about 54% of adults now report drinking, which is the lowest since the Gallup poll. This survey began tracking in 1939. And even more, the average number of drinks per week has dropped to about 2.8, which is the lowest since the mid-90s. And I think a lot of this is really being sparked by kind of the younger generations and leading this sober, curious movement where we have mocktails and alcohol-free wines and zero-proof cocktails and non-alcoholic beers, and how it's really becoming mainstream and not fringe. I remember when I first stopped drinking, there was no such thing as a mocktail. I'd have to ask for like Sprite with a little bit of cherry, or I'd have to ask for some made up drink or concoction that I'd make up in my mind. But now there are entire menus for these kinds of drinks, which I just think is so cool. And I think ultimately, as we're opening up more conversations around the rise of mental and chronic illness in our country today, I think that public attitudes are shifting and that people are becoming curious around what it means to live a healthier life. And so a majority of Americans now believe that even moderate drinking can carry health risks. So kind of in closing here, guys, I just want to bring, a bit of like a somatic and a body first lens to this. Addiction is not a personal failure. It is the body and the nervous system's way of saying, I need help regulating this pain. And so with that in mind, instead of looking at alcohol as the problem, we can look at it as, what problem is it trying to solve? Because it's actually the solution to something. We can get curious rather than criticizing ourselves. You see, that shame fuels addiction, but compassion is what heals it. Curiosity is what heals it. Connectedness is what heals it. And so in the somatic world, we use somatic healing as a way to address the body's stored memories and these unmet survival responses. We also lean into community and co-regulation as key because our nervous systems are wired for safety in connection, not isolation. When shame lives in isolation, it breeds, but when we speak it out loud, it gets smaller. And when I think back to the seasons where I was really struggling with the alcohol use, when I was met with compassion, with understanding, without judgment, I felt so much more supported and so much more empowered to overcome the addiction. And when we bring back into our awareness and our perspective that these addictions actually help us to feel comfort, to feel warmness, to feel peace, which is what we are actually biologically supposed to learn through connection in our earliest years, then we might be able to rationalize that connection to others and connection to some type of source or some type of faith or spirituality, connection to something outside of ourselves that helps us to feel like we belong can actually be incredibly healing when we're working with addiction. When we take something out of our life that we know is not serving us, how can we replace it? Because we have to replace it with something, right? Something that's healthy, something that's wholesome, something that helps us to feel more empowered, more comfort, more peace. For me, I have found personally that it's faith, nervous system, and community, that those are the true replacement for my substance use. And for you, you can ask the same question, like, what is that formula? What are the things in your life that you can start to lean into more, that you can create and cultivate within yourself or around you to fill that void that has potentially been there for most of your life? So, in just bringing this to a close, I just want to leave you all with an encouragement and a reflection here. If you're struggling, I want you to know that you are not broken and that you're actually brilliant. You are adaptive, and adaptation means that there is a way back to wholeness. Healing here is not necessarily about taking away the crutch. It's about tending to the original wound and leaning into a safe community, having somatic tools, having a connection outside of yourself, whether it's spiritual or something or someone. These are the things that can bring you back into that wholeness.